Well, and also understanding how data works, which I think can bring us to the third section of this conversation, which is about artificial intelligence, which is really data-driven, a data-driven language model. How do you see artificial intelligence impacting how we collect and analyze data in the present and moving forward into the future?
Well, and this is one more reason why I think a base level of data literacy for everybody is going to be essential, because AI is going to be baked into so much of what we do. And if the vast majority of us don't have any level of understanding of how those algorithms work, how they're influenced by the data that are being fed into them, that they're being trained on, right? We're going to have a whole lot of stuff done to us that we don't stand up and say, that's not how we want it done, or we want it done this way versus that way, right? And you can only have those conversations. You can only have that level of intelligent engagement or intentional, I don't mean intelligent, intentional engagement, if you have a basic understanding of that. You don't have to know how AI models actually work mathematically, right? But you do need to understand a little bit of how the data that comes into them is impacting it and what it means
you have
when
to
an AI
understand
model
that they are
predicts
mathematically based.
Yes,
right? Because
exactly.
the interface gives the illusion that you are being spoken to with language, but behind that language are a bunch of statistics.
And I think the number one thing that we need to understand about how AI works, is that it is 100% past based. Meaning, whatever it's telling you about now, whatever it's telling you about the future, it's basing that off of what it's seen in the past.
Right.
And we already know, and there are so many more qualified people out there to talk to about this, but I will just bring up, right, that if, for example, you train an AI model on tell me who the best people are to hire for engineers, and you feed it 20 years worth of hiring data and the results of how many people stick around in your company and who ends up being very successful as an engineer, blah, 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 your model, and they've already done this, your model comes back and says you should hire a man. Because historically, that's what we've done. No, it's just that historically, that's what we've done. And so your AI model is looking at what's been done, and it's saying, well, 90% of the engineers that stay in your company for 10 years are men. So if I want to give you a 90% chance that they stay with your company, I'm going to say hire a man. And it's not that the AI model itself is sexist, right? It's not like, I hate women, right? It's just basing its future predictions off of what it's seen happen in the past. And that's, again, where when you said, how is it going to impact our data collection? It depends on how committed we are to making sure that our models that we develop going forward are taking us the place that we intend them to take, or whether we're going to just sort of passively accept whatever comes out of them. And if we decide to take a stand and say, we want to make sure that we're steering the ship the way we want to go, we're not just going to follow the numbers, but we're going to go the direction we want to go, then we are going to have to change how we're collecting data. We're going to have to change how we're processing it when we put it into models. There's going to have to be new oversampling techniques that come in, right, to correct for the way that things have been happening in the past of the history before, the way that we have the data already. And we may have to come up with new statistical models. I mean, there's a lot of things that we might have to do differently, but again, only if we're willing to actually engage with them intentionally.
Do you see yourself using AI, and how do you see yourself using AI? And AI is loaded, right? Because there's a lot of this guy right here is what a lot of people think of AI. We already have AI for the past 20 years to some degree with heuristic analysis, automated. So anyways, but how would you?
And like you have the whole very vague umbrella of machine learning and artificial intelligence and so many different kinds of artificial intelligence, right? Natural language processing is very different than algorithmic predictions.
That's right.
Right. So
that's right.
We're being fast and sloppy with sort of that general categorization. But yes, I think using tools, it goes back to I'm not going to use a sword because it can kill people. Well, I also can use it to cut steak, right? Knives are useful, but they can be really bad. It's not the tool itself that necessarily means that it's good or bad. We can be very thoughtful in how we engineer it and in picking the right tools. I probably don't need a katana to cut my steak. A nice steak knife would work really well.
Fun.
It'd be really fun, but exactly. Exactly. All again goes towards what's your goal.
John Belushi pictures going on in my head. Samurai chef, yes. Right. I think we got a clip we got to add.
And so when you say, am I going to use AI? Well, yes, if I find a really good tool and I've done my research in terms of how it's going to support me, I'm going to find ways that I can use it that helps me be better at what I do. But I'm not going to just blindly say, well, AI, you decide things. I mean, so Chat GPT is a great example because that's what everyone's using. I find it really helpful when I'm doing presentations and I need a very specific story or example.
Yeah.
And I can say, hey, Chat GPT, I want you to find me an example in 1800s history, right? That era of how we used to do medicine in a way that was actually harmful instead of helpful. You know, the things that we used to think were actually hurtful, and we practice this in medicine, and we now know that that's different. And it'll give me 6 examples. And then I can go and verify that those are real. I'll say, give me your sources. I'll go look up the sources, right? And that's a great way to use Chat GPT. Because it's helping basically organize the information out there. And I know what example I wanted. I've written the talk, right? And I'm looking for a very specific example, and it can find it for me.
Yeah, it's a research assistant in many ways. I mean, I could see also from qualitative research, I could see having it help with transcripts, even doing some coding for you, you know, so you can find themes and stuff like that. I could really see it expediting somebody's dissertation process.
Yeah. And again, allowing, like, I've always been a huge proponent of let machines do what machines are good at so that humans can do what humans are good at. And I think the most effective way of using AI will be exactly that, of like, let's not have AI do the things that really are what we are good at, because they're going to do it wrong, or there's going to be some serious unintended consequences of that. But if we have it do things that we're not that great at, right? And then it frees us up to focus on the things that we do better, then that's a wonderful partnership. I mean, I think about medical coding, right? Rather than having your doctor spend half the time he or she has with you trying to figure out how to chart things, have a speech recognition software listen to what the doctor's saying and translate all of that into the codes so that he can sit there and just talk to you, right? Or she can just say, hey, tell me about your medical history. And she's sitting there looking at you in the eyes while you're telling her about what's happened to you medically. And that's just transcribing in the background. And the doctor doesn't have to worry about that, right?
Yeah. And there's somebody double checking. There's still
100%.
Right, the doctor still have to double check that for sure.
100%. And that's true of a lot of things, right? A lot of things of what we do. In fact, even with human coders, there are mistakes that get made. You know, so I would say that, and this brings back, you know, we talk about self-driving cars, and people are like, well, what if it crashes? I'm like, we kill 60,000 people every year when we crash, right? Like, we don't need self-driving cars to be have zero accidents. We just need them to be better than we are.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure. And I think, and I really appreciate what you're saying about focusing on what humans are good at, which is, again, to your example of looking the patient in the eye, that empathy aspect, you know, and I think humans have taste too. To go back to the jokes that we used at the beginning of this episode, they're terrible jokes, right? We said them anyhow, but we can assess that they're not very good jokes. But AI doesn't know that. AI thinks they're brilliant.
But Dan, I could write a bad joke too. Trust me, all my jokes will be bad if I write them. Does that make me AI, or maybe it
you
does?
could write a bad joke, but you know it's a bad joke. AI doesn't know it's a bad joke.
I don't know if I would or wouldn't. Maybe, I'd hope I would, for sure. All right, well, here's a really, on this topic, super important question, Alexandra. With all the analysis and the data collection you've done on AI, will AI take over the world and destroy us, humanity as we know it? What are the statistics?
Right. Pretty sure I've seen that Terminator movie. Actually, all three of those Terminator movies, or whatever. It's like 6 now. I think that's up to us. So I think a better question is, are we going to put AI in a position where it does things to us that we claimed we didn't want it to do? Right. I think the odds of a true Skynet that becomes self-aware and it makes decisions to take over. And I would even argue, as cheesy as Skynet is, that there were decisions humans made earlier on that enabled that, right? This, and I come back to, I had to read 1984 and Brave New World in high school. And I remember thinking about how we're all so worried about Big Brother. We're all so worried about the 1984 where some foreign agent, right? This outside they comes in and takes us over. And really, Brave New World was so much more accurate that we do it to ourselves, right? That in Brave New
Yeah.
World, it's not that there's any external bad guy. It's that we all wanted easier, softer, cushier lives. We didn't want to work so hard, and we were willing to give things up and turn over authority of things in our own lives to ourselves, right? To our machines, to the things that we create for ourselves. No one does it to us. We do it to ourselves.
That's a theme
and I think
Dan and I
that's
have talked
true.
about. Yeah, Dan and I have had this discussion around this notion. Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to agree. No, I think it's true. The horror of the 1984 style surveillance state is that we have done it to ourselves, right? Through social media, through having cameras everywhere, through the way we think about the world. I mean, yeah, we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, and an example I've used with previously with Dan was like just as simple as the phone of Google Maps. You know, Google Maps will tell me to get from point A to point B, and that's simple. I assume, on one hand, sometimes that it probably knows better about how to get me from point A to point B because I assume it knows stuff that I don't know from a modeling perspective. Perhaps there's an accent, things like that. But there have been instances where I've decided to go. I know there's a faster way, and I got there faster. It did not know about that alley. It did not know, but I have a tendency to say, to your point with the Brave New World concept, it's easier to not make a decision. That any level of decision is actually a point of friction in the brain potentially. It actually will make your stress levels go up a little bit. It could be good stress, it could be good bad stress. Just should I pick up that cup of coffee? That's a decision-making mechanism. And we'll get to the point where we'll be like, you know what? I'm just not going to make decisions anymore. This machine's going to make them all for me.